I like Sayid as much as the next person, but come on, this really should have been a Shannon episode. Welcome to the Lost Explained episode guide, where we explore and explain the TV show Lost, episode by episode, mystery by mystery. Now, this guide is spoiler heavy for the entire series and is intended for those who already know the secrets of the island. The Greater Good is the 21st episode of Season 1 and our second Sayid-centric instalment. Now, it's a perfectly serviceable episode, pitting the island's interrogator against the island's hunter. I love the matchup between these two and the psychological game of cat and mouse that ensues. However, as a follow-up to the tightly written Do No Harm, this one simply doesn't deliver the same dramatic goods, and that's because the focus of the story is all wrong. Let's get into it. Following Boone's death, The Greater Good begins with a funeral, or, as Michael Giacchino playfully titled it in his soundtrack, a booneral, which immediately sets a mournful tone. But Lost can rarely hold a funeral without a bit of drama on the side. Locke shows up to the gathering covered in the blood of the man they are currently burying, which to me indicates that the man isn't thinking too clearly right now, and neither is Jack. The emotions hit hard and fast as the exhausted doctor confronts the absent hunter in a bone-chilling moment as he demands to know,
"Where were you? Where the hell were you, you son of a bitch? What did you do to her? What did you do? Where were you? You just left him to die! You lied to me! Where were you?"
Both the man of faith and the man of science are caught in the throes of emotional and physical exhaustion as the group, Shannon in particular, look on. It's a really electric scene. Jack's scream goes right through me every time, and it lays the groundwork for everything that follows. However, what follows isn't the Jack versus Locke showdown that the previous cliffhanger promised us, nor is it an exploration of Shannon's grief. Instead, the focus shifts to Sayid's moral dilemma as he takes on the task of interrogating Locke. Now, while Sayid and Locke's scenes are undoubtedly compelling, which I'll get into shortly, this narrative choice sidelines the one person who should absolutely be at the centre of this tragedy. Shannon's heartbreak, her desire for vengeance, and her complex relationship with Boone are treated as a subplot here rather than the emotional core, and therein lies my fundamental issue with the episode. By making the fallout of Boone's death about Sayid rather than Shannon, the writers missed the chance to craft a more organic, emotionally charged follow-up to Do No Harm, and do a disservice to Shannon's arc in the process. This was the perfect opportunity to flesh her out further. Had they done that here, they might have found more reasons to keep her around for longer in Season 2. But to be honest, I think they were already lining her up for the chopping block to make room for the incoming tail section survivors. Hearts and Minds was a Boone episode told from his point of view, meaning Shannon has never actually been given the narrative space to express her own interiority, only to serve as an emotional counterpoint in someone else's story. She doesn't even get her own centric episode until Season 2, which also happens to be the one that kills her off for good. This repeats a pattern that we saw in Homecoming, when the focus should have been on the female character in question, but instead shifted to the male love interest instead. The truth is, the writers often fumbled female character plotlines in this way, sometimes by marginalising them during a major crisis, as we'll see laid bare in the Season 1 finale when most of the women are left behind at the caves. There are also consistent examples of fridging in this show, a trope where a female character is killed off in order to give a male character emotional motivation or a new arc. Shannon for Sayid, Libby for Hurley, Charlotte for Faraday, and even to some extent Juliet for Sawyer. We'll unpack these more as we go along, but it's worth noting early that Lost often had a blind spot when it came to developing its female characters and giving them better agency. The Greater Good is one such missed opportunity. There's a key scene between Locke and Shannon at the start where he apologises for what happened, but he's so aloof and his apology so half-hearted that it actually kind of makes him rather unlikable in the moment.
I hope you can forgive me. I'm sorry.
Like, what the hell was that, John? I love you, man, but you really make it hard sometimes. The Locke we've come to know would be far more emotionally perceptive, recognising how all this looks, especially to Shannon, which is why I have to put this down to emotional exhaustion. We could also argue that he's repressing his guilt here, burying it so deep that he won't fully reckon with his own culpability until the season 2 finale. Though I think this scene is simply written to make him seem indifferent, just in order to fuel Shannon's rage and get the story moving. And that it does. Shannon quickly goes into survival mode again, now seeing Sayid not as a source of comfort, but as someone who can do something to even the score for her. And guilt is what is clearly driving her motivations. She was off romancing Sayid whilst her brother lay dying. Now, Year 1 had made Sayid the group's de facto investigator, so it makes sense that he'd take on the case of Boone's suspicious death. Of course, he's doing it partly out of love for Shannon, wanting to give her answers, but he's also uniquely qualified to assess Locke's guilt. Thankfully, this leads to the best scenes of the episode.
Back in Iraq, you were an interrogator.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Finally, two titans face off. Both are resourceful, reliable pillars of the group, and both understand people, just in different ways. Sayid sees through the lies people tell others, while Locke sees through the lies people tell themselves. Their battle of wits and wills is pretty fun to watch. Back in Confidence Man, Sayid used brute force. Here he takes a more intellectual approach, a method he'll refine later with Benry Gale. The threat of violence is never far away with Sayid, and Locke senses that, which is why every exchange crackles with tension as Sayid tests Locke's honesty, and Locke calmly holds his ground, even as he foolishly conceals the truth about the hatch. As discussed in Hearts and Minds episode guide, Locke has become intensely possessive regarding that discovery, and has come to view it as something intended for him, and him alone. Lost often juggled its large ensemble by rotating character pairings, and sometimes characters simply didn't share much screen time. For example, across the entire series, John Locke and Jin Kwon only have 2 exchanges, one in season 2,
Free at last, huh?
and another in season 5.
Don't bring Son back.
No, I have to bring them all back. That's how it works.
How you know?
I just know.
Meanwhile, fan favourites like Desmond Hume and Richard Alpert never share a single scene together. So in many ways, this episode feels like the writers experimenting with new combinations, testing out dynamics between 2 of their stronger characters. Of course, Sayid and Locke have crossed paths before. They collaborated on the Ethan entrapment plan, and they sparred briefly in Confidence Man. But this is their first meaningful head-to-head. Locke finally admits that it was him who knocked out Sayid in the Moth, and it won't be the last time he sabotages the group's chances of finding a way off the island.
You were hit from behind, knocked unconscious. When you woke up, the transceiver, your equipment was destroyed. That was me.
The remainder of the episode sees Shannon rejecting Sayid's conclusions and taking matters into her own hands. It does raise the question of how she knew where the guns were, considering Jack kept them hidden from everybody. But this minor plot hole does actually get patched up in Season 3's expose, which inserts a scene showing word of the guns spreading through the camp.
Hey, what's going on? Kate and her 2 boyfriends found a case of guns that fell out of the plane, but they decided they didn't really need to tell the camp.
The case is locked. The key is around Jack's neck, all right? I promise you they're safe.
Anyway, our girl's got a gun now, leading to the climactic standoff. And while some viewers criticise her impulsiveness here, I completely understand where she's coming from. Sure, we know Locke isn't a murderer because we've actually seen the accident from his point of view, but Shannon hasn't. All she knows is that Locke lied, then disappeared to leave her brother to die, only to then return the next day covered in Boone's blood. Then he got called out and attacked by Jack, and all she got in return was a half-hearted apology from a very guilty-looking guy. Hell, I'd be suspicious of Locke too. Dude is being all kinds of shady. Sayid diffuses the situation, not just to save Locke, but also to save Shannon. He knows what taking a life costs, and he understands it would destroy her. The implication is this moment ends their relationship, but with the season nearly over, the show never really explores that rift in a meaningful way. I've always loved the look that Jack gives Locke in the aftermath, that pure disgust and loathing, as if he wouldn't have cared if Shannon had pulled the trigger. It foreshadows the moment in the season 4 premiere when Jack has Locke at gunpoint and doesn't hesitate. Their relationship never recovers from this, it's only put on pause by greater threats, such as the others and the hatch. Elsewhere, Claire finally gets some rest while Charlie plays babysitter. This is a gentle diversion from the heavier booneral drama. Charlie tries various tricks to calm the baby, still unnamed at this point, leading to a sweet exchange with Hurley when he flubs the lyrics to Itsy Bitsy Spider.
Down came the rain and drowned the spider out.
Dude, it's washed. Wash the spider out? Unless it's some kind of British version.
Oh, okay.
It's a small line, but in hindsight, an eerie bit of foreshadowing for Charlie's eventual fate. It's ultimately Sawyer's southern drawl that settles the baby, and that's a charmingly unexpected touch, which goes further to softening Sawyer up for the audience. A couple of other nice bits of foreshadowing pop up too. Kate drugging Jack to force him to rest mirrors her doing the same thing to her husband in season 3.
I crushed up some sleeping pills. Put them in your juice.
Why would you? You drugged me?
Yeah. I drugged you.
You what?
I had to. Otherwise, they would think you knew.
And when Walt asks his father about encountering any sharks out in the water...
What if a shark attacks?
Sharks ain't getting anywhere near us, man.
Well, you won't, Walt, but Michael certainly will. Sayid's flashbacks mirror the island story thematically, showing how his love for a woman drives him towards moral darkness. In Australia, Sayid is manipulated by intelligence agents into betraying his old friend Assam in exchange for information about Nadia. It's a tragic irony. Sayid could have saved Assam from extremism, but instead he exploits that friendship to serve his own longing.
The Imam preaches peace, Sayid. That every human life is sacred.
It's true. Innocent lives will be lost in service of a greater good.
The moment Assam realises the betrayal is pretty powerful and intense. It provides one of the only truly memorable scenes in the flashback narrative. On the island, Sayid seems to have learned from this mistake, choosing reason over vengeance when Shannon seeks payback against Locke. It feels like he's making progress, basically, until Lost later shows just how fragile Sayid's growth has been, because his morality will collapse again when he loses the woman he loves, twice more, suggesting that his capacity for love and destruction are inseparably bound. Still, the flashback itself is one of the season's weaker efforts in my opinion. It leans too heavily on the early 2000s terrorist cell tropes, popularised by shows such as 24, and it reduces a complex character like Sayid, who is a former Iraqi soldier, not a terrorist, into being part of a familiar post-9/11 narrative. It's also oddly contrived. The only reason he's in Australia is to help the American government foil a terrorist plot happening in Sydney, which doesn't feel especially logical or organic. The attempt to tie his presence in Sydney back to Nadia makes sense on paper, but I think it's clumsily executed. The writers should have put Nadia herself at the centre of this radicalised group, giving Sayid's actions more emotional immediacy and a clearer parallel to his attempt to save Shannon from violence in the present. Donny Keshavars gives a solid performance as Assam, bringing a bit of pathos to a thinly written role of a man in spiritual and moral conflict. But aside from the intense van confrontation that caps off the flashback, the storyline feels more like connective filler than an essential chapter in Sayid's emotional evolution. The episode ends with Sayid demanding Locke take him to the hatch, which is admittedly a cool cliffhanger to end on, but really this whole episode feels like it should have come somewhere in the middle of the season rather than at the end. Unlike the two-punch combo of Deus Ex Machina and Do No Harm, this doesn't have endgame energy to it at all. It actually comes across as more arbitrary because the focus is on Sayid rather than Shannon, and therefore it doesn't carry the same weight. A similar problem will affect the next episode, Born to Run, which is surely one of the most underwhelming lead-ins to a season finale in the entire show's run. For me, The Greater Good is a mid-tier episode. It has some good scenes and fun dynamics between two core characters. Naveen Andrews and Terry O'Quinn are clearly enjoying bouncing off one another here, and I know they got on very well in real life. But it lacks the dramatic impact one might expect considering the seismic events of what came before it. There are no real mysteries raised in this episode. In fact, it deliberately pulls back from the puzzle box storytelling to focus on character conflict. And that's fine by me, especially since we're right on the edge of the season 1 finale, where the mysteries will begin to ramp up again. We do, however, get answers about why Sayid was in Australia, part of a sting operation to bust a terrorist cell with the promise of finding Nadia. And of course, we finally learn who knocked out Sayid in the Moth. I've already discussed why Locke did it in the guide for that episode, but it is worth reiterating here. His explanation is mostly a convenient cover for his true motivations.
This is one time you better not be telling the truth.
I did what was in everyone's best interest.
You ruined my chance to find the source.
The source of a distress call that kept saying they're dead. It killed them all over and over. Is that a place you really want to lead people to?
But we know Locke isn't afraid of the monster, certainly not at this point. To him, it represents the soul of the island, perhaps even the force behind his miracle, and he believes each survivor was brought here for a reason, so leaving would mean turning his back on destiny, as well as losing the chance to understand it. Locke desperately wants answers, not least of all as to what is in that damn hatch. I think his real fear is that rescue would strip all of that away. If they were found, he might lose his newfound mobility and be returned to that wheelchair, as well as his lonely, unremarkable life as an office drone. Whereas on the island, he gets to be the man he always wanted to be, capable, respected, essential. Rescue, therefore, is actually a threat to him, so he justifies the assault and sabotage as being for altruistic reasons. Locke will always find some reason to destroy or impede the chances of rescue or escape. It's deeply ironic that when the time finally comes for him to leave the island, he does so voluntarily in order to bring back those who left. So in lieu of any truly meaty mysteries from this episode, I shall use this section to remind you of this channel's very own interactive mystery that you can participate in. Somewhere in my episode guide is a link to a secret video. When you find this symbol, you will find the link. More details can be found in my Numbers episode guide. Happy hunting. There is an interesting line of dialogue spoken by one of the members of the terrorist cell.
Perhaps it's not happenstance that you and Essam met at the mosque. Perhaps it is fate.
Obviously, this line is intended to seem, in the moment, like he has rumbled Sayid's duplicity, but the twist is that he actually puts it down to fate instead. That Sayid's presence here was meant to be. This reflects a recurring idea in Lost about people hanging their luck or their woes on fate, but this scene and storyline, and indeed many future scenes and storylines in Lost, reveal that sometimes what seems like fate might actually be someone else's manipulation. We know that Sayid isn't there because God willed it so, he's there because the international intelligence community willed it so. With that said, this series of events are absolutely part of fate's design because this is how the man ends up on Oceanic 815. So even when people are at war with one another and there are moles and traitors within as men fight over ideology and territory, it's still all in service of a greater causality, which means this line that mistakes human connivance for divine fate is ironically and unintentionally correct, at least in terms of the big picture. But just because something is fated to be doesn't mean that fate is always on your side. The title, The Greater Good, references the idea of sacrificing someone or something for a higher purpose, and questioning whether the ends ever truly justify the means. Sayid uses Essam pretending he's doing it for the greater good, when really he's doing it for himself. On the island, Sayid again believes he's acting for the group's protection by interrogating Locke, but deep down, he's doing it partly to appease Shannon. Locke, meanwhile, acts in service of what he believes is the island's divine plan, even when that means letting Boone die, a belief that he'll articulate more clearly in the finale when he calls Boone's death a sacrifice for the greater good. Even Shannon's sideline storyline reflects this. Her desire for revenge could be seen as moral justice, but Sayid restrains her, raising the question of who decides what the greater good truly is, and at what cost. At the end of the episode, Sayid claims that he spared Locke because his survival was important to the group.
I did it because I sense you might be our best hope of surviving here.
I really wish that idea had been explored more, especially given how skeptical Sayid becomes of Locke in later seasons. Some of his reactions to Locke's more unhinged pronouncements become genuinely funny in hindsight.
We got a compass bearing, and I'm pretty sure if we follow it, it'll lead us right to him.
How?
Because of the way the sunlight hit Mr. Echo's stick when John was burying him.
Which leads to a fascinating contrast between their belief systems. Sayid is a Muslim, and his spirituality is one of Lost's more understated portrayals of faith. Perhaps because the writers weren't entirely comfortable exploring it. His worldview is rooted in belief in God and moral accountability, but unlike Locke's faith, Sayid's doesn't manifest as mysticism or surrender. It's more internal than that, and perhaps further influenced by his sense of duty and his own guilty past. What's interesting is that he's a character who can both pray and solder a circuit board without feeling the need to reconcile the two. He is, in many ways, the true balance between science and faith that Jack and Locke can never quite achieve. Sayid never seeks to reconcile these seemingly contrary parts of himself because he does not view them as a conflict. In Islam, fate and free will coexist. God is all-knowing, yet humans are accountable for their choices and will be judged accordingly. However, over time, this duality becomes Sayid's tragedy, because he is a believer undone, not by doubt, but of having faith without the hope of redemption. He thinks he is damned, therefore gives in to despair, violence, and detachment. And that is why I would argue that what we see happen to him in Season 6, and the controversial turn his character takes, is actually a logical progression of his inner conflicts that were set up in this first season. Sayid has always wrestled with the darkness within. There's this old quote in Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter that reads, "No man for any considerable period can wear one face to himself and another to the multitude without finally getting bewildered as to which may be the true." In other words, a man who wears two faces for long enough can forget which one is real. As Sayid spirals throughout the series, he gets tangled up in this very problem. He has viewed himself as a bad person for so long that he now believes that is all he is, and subsequently he succumbs to that side of himself. That is until he is reminded that his true face, the one that is real, is the one that we have seen on the island all along, especially in these early seasons, and it's like Hurley tells him in The Sideways.
I think you're a good guy, Sayid. I know a lot of people have told you that you're not. Maybe you've heard it so many times you started believing it. But you can't let other people tell you what you are, dude. You have to decide that for yourself.
The only number that really matters in this episode is 8:15, which is visible on the window as Sayid leaves the building in his flashback, marking his path towards Oceanic 815 and the tortured torturer's fateful journey to the island. In the next episode guide, we are circling back to Kate for the penultimate episode of the season in Born to Run, an episode that is functional but hardly worthy of leading into the grand finale. If you enjoy this breakdown, please check out the other videos in the series. Every view helps keep this project going. Also, don't forget to like, share and subscribe too if you haven't already. Also consider donating to my Patreon if you'd like to see any of these videos earlier or catch some of my extra content on there. Thank you for watching. I'll see you back on the island.